All right, so today, pretty straightforward day, all things considered. Today, we don't have a whole lot we need to get through. I mean, some of it kind of depends on you as far as when we actually are done with everything. First and foremost, the big thing that you want to walk out of here having accomplished today is completing your World War One SAQ. That is due today. It's going to be your first grade of next 6 weeks. It's really not that bad. I mean, I think most of you guys have kind of figured out the SAQ by now. Some of you are still struggling. We'll go over a couple tips here in just a second, but kind of how the day is going to go. I'm going to show you some sample SAQs. I'm actually going to show you the last SAQ that we did. And I'm going to give you some ideas of what could have constituted a good answer that would have gotten all the points. Maybe even tell you some of the stuff that I saw that didn't get all the points. Hopefully, just kind of seeing those examples and thinking back to what you yourself did, hopefully that'll help make sense of things. Once that's done, we are going to watch the crash course over World War One. Just a reminder, I think it's not a bad idea to kind of refresh your memory before you actually write the SAQ. Then whatever time is left, knock out your SAQ. Now it's a 12-minute time deal, and the time limit is very important, guys. If you run out of time, I got to grade what you have. I mean, time limits, it's kind of part of the class. So while this is an open note, don't over rely on that. My advice, go through it, answer the questions, and then once you've got more or less all of them answered, go back, double check your notes, try to throw in some details. But more on that here in a second as we go through the SAQ. We might end early. You might end early. I mean, we will end early. After the video, it's kind of your time to get the SAQ done. If you want to look over your notes first, that's fine. But definitely get that done before you leave. You don't want to have that hanging over your head. Other news and notes. Next week, it is a brand new 6 weeks. It's the fifth 6 weeks. It's kind of a weird one, though. There's only going to be 5 weeks because we shifted around the calendar due to snowpocalypse and everything. So we're gonna hit it pretty fast. Next week we are gonna have another DBQ essay. That'll be our first test grade of the 6 weeks. DBQ, it's been a little bit, so Monday we will go over how to do it again. We'll do a little practice, and then we'll talk about exactly when you're gonna do the thing. But it is gonna be due on Thursday. You might have some time in class at some point next week to work on it. But it is something that honestly probably you're going to have to do for homework just because I want to give you a full hour to write this thing, just like you'll have on the AP exam. Well, the problem is our class periods are only 50 minutes long. So there's going to be at least one day that if you want to knock it out in class, you can, but just know you won't have nearly as much time as not nearly. You'll have 10 minutes less than if you decide to do it at home. But that's going to be due on Thursday. Don't worry about that yet. We'll talk all about it on Monday. Get you all squared away. I think it'll be really not that bad. Then at the end of next week, and I know it's early, but we're going to go ahead and do the first notebook check of the 6 weeks. Right now, you've got the bookwork you did over World War One. You've got the World War One PowerPoint notes. There's a couple things that we're going to add in next week. Hopefully, this will be a pretty easy notebook check for everyone. So stay on top of it. Let's try to go into next week on a good note, and hopefully today you can get a really easy daily grade to kind of build off of for the rest of the 6 weeks moving forward. So I got some samples here. Before we do this SAQ, I got some samples, and these should look familiar. This is the last SAQ we did over the age of imperialism. So hopefully this stuff's still kind of fresh. So the first question, you had these pictures. You had one of the guy standing over Africa. That's Cecil Rhodes over here. We actually showed these in the PowerPoint. You've got China being kind of knifed up. And the question said, identify and explain one specific historical development represented in the pictures above. Now, I just want you to think back. What are some things that you could have used? What are some things that you did use? You don't have to say it out loud or anything. But I want you to reflect on how you answered this question and all the options available to you. Again, on SAQs, you need to be as specific as possible. So really, your answer should be based on some sort of academic vocabulary. All this crazy stuff we take notes over and do vocab on, and do the book work on. I mean, that's the sort of stuff. That's why we do that stuff. So you can have very specific academic historical vocabulary to reference. So I looked at this, and I did this morning, just like, well, how would I answer it? First thing that came to mind, I kind of like this picture at the left. I decided to go with spheres of influence. So the ACE format is the 3-sentence format we've talked about many, many times. The first sentence, you just answer the question with some vocab. The second sentence, you clarify. You give me like a definition of that vocab or some sort of explanation. And then the third sentence, and even the fourth, if you want to keep going, that's just details. That really shows the reader that you really do know what you're talking about. So my answer here on one development represented in the picture above, and I'm just referencing the one on the left, is China being carved into spheres of influence during the 19th century, the 1800s. Okay, spheres of influence is the base of my answer. Now I got to explain what it means. That's when the second sentence, clarity, comes in. Spheres of influence are areas in which foreign powers have a large amount of economic or political power in another country. Pretty straightforward. But now I want to maybe give some detail. What more can I explain specifically about this situation, China being carved up into spheres of influence during this time period? So here's what I put. Following their defeat in the Opium Wars, something specific, China gave exclusive trading privileges to Great Britain and several other European nations within Chinese territory. And then I just felt like throwing a little bit more detail in, not much, but it makes a better answer, which contributed to civil unrest resulting in the Taiping and Boxer rebellions. Again, this is not an essay. It's a short answer. You just need to demonstrate that you do know what you're talking about. You want to use specific vocabulary. And the way all this is kind of used in here, it's pretty clear. Yeah, that's a pretty complete answer. Let's look at the next one. Identify and explain one example of American imperialism between 1750 to 1900. Kind of close your eyes, think, oh my God, what did I use for an answer? What could I use for an answer? Here's what I used for an answer. The first sentence, the straight up answer, one example of the United States engaging in empire building is their participation in the Spanish-American War. Okay, so this is something specific. You can build an answer around this. Well, now, second sentence, you got to explain at least a little bit about what the Spanish-American War was. Now, something like this, it's hard to define. It's hard to define a conflict. But at least in this, you need to explain a little bit about what it was all about. Okay, show some detail, show you know what you're talking about. So what I put, this war was fought in 1898 between the United States and Spain and resulted in the loss of Spain's remaining overseas colonies. It's pretty solid, okay? But a little bit more detail. What colonies are we talking about? I mean, just any more detail that you can add, I'm telling you, that's going to help just hammer it home. So what I got here, and I don't know why I put ABC. I did that this morning, and it was early, and I was clearly out of my mind. I should say ACE, but still. The United States gained the Philippines, Guam, Puerto Rico, and a great degree of influence over the newly independent Cuba, expanding American territory and demonstrating that the United States is a major world power. I mean, every element goes back to what we're saying, American imperialism. We answered it. Again, the second sentence should say C. Clarify, all about overseas colonies. And then I got into some of the specifics. Again, the more detailed you can be, the better. Last example, and we'll see if I screwed up and put ABC again. Identify and explain one specific example, one specific economic, political, or ideological motivation for imperialism during the 19th century. And this comes straight from your notes, guys. This was one of the first things that you're supposed to have in your next notebook check. We did the little reading assignment where you listed this stuff out. Well, here's what I have. One ideological motivation for imperialism during the 19th century was the theory of social Darwinism. Boom, some vocab. Something I can then clarify. This theory claims that countries largely of white European heritage were racially and culturally superior to the other peoples of the world, as evidenced by their level of industrialization and military superiority. Now, that might be enough, but you always want to make it more fully complete. You want to give more detail if you have it, connect it to other ideas, maybe even other, key concepts that we've discussed. European and American leaders used this racist theory to claim that it was a white man's burden. to rule over peoples in Africa, Asia, and the Pacific, as these areas were less advanced and needed guidance from more sophisticated nations in order to thrive. Couple things that I saw. I saw people come close on this, but it was social Darwinism. Well, that's good, but if you don't explain what it is, no points. If you dance around it, well, they thought white people were superior. Okay, that's accurate, but I need more detail. Again, this is a short answer question. It's got to be complete sentences. It's got to be fully thought out, and we really do need some sort of specific academic vocabulary in there. For the first one, with the picture, I had a lot of people say, "Oh, that's imperialism." Well, okay, it is. I mean, the name of the SAQ is imperialism SAQ, so that's not really new information. But then they didn't even define it. Then they didn't even necessarily give me specific examples of imperialism. Again, you need to be specific. Another thing I noticed, be original. This is open notes, but it does not mean copy and paste from the PowerPoint. Use your own words, express yourself, be creative. Yeah, we're making it open notes because, I know the remote students, a lot of them are using it. So I try to make it fair for everybody. Everybody can use the notes. That's okay. We're trying to get down the structure and how to do it. But don't over rely on that stuff. That's why people run out of time. They try to look up every single answer and, oh man, I only had time to do number one. Well, yeah, that's because you spent 10 minutes looking up number one. No, answer the questions, go back through your notes if time permits, and then maybe put in a little bit of detail. But guys, if you've been paying attention and you look over the notes beforehand, you should know this stuff. Plus, if you're taking an AP test, there are no notes. You're not really preparing yourself for what's coming if you're only relying on your notes. So really, try to use your head. The ACE format, again, it is the preferred kind of structure. That is not a College Board rule, but it is highly advised. And I will tell you, in the summers, this is what I usually grade for the College Board on the AP test, the SAQ section. I've graded DBQs, but the SAQ is the one I do the most. And I'm telling you, when kids use the ACE format and they follow the instructions, as long as they kind of know what they're talking about, they get the points. That's why I push it. You definitely need to. And then just the final reminder, and I said this earlier, this is timed. Okay, I don't want to get a bunch of emails, oh, I ran out of time. I didn't get it done because of the time. You know that in advance. In fact, when you click on it before you ever start, it says, and it's highlighted, a time limit. We got to take those things seriously. If you run out of time, it hurts me, but I'm going to grade what you got, and that's all I can really base my grade on. So before you start, look over your notes a little bit. And again, you should have plenty of time to do that today in class. All right, so we are now going to transition to our next little thing. We're going to watch the World War I crash course. You don't have to take notes. It's all good, but I'm hoping it will kind of jog your memory from some stuff that we talked about throughout the week. Once that's done, your mission for the rest of the day, get your SAQ done. It's 12 minutes. It won't take you very long. If you want to look over your notes a little bit beforehand, which I would advise, that would be ideal. And then if you finish early, I have put under today's link, and we've looked at them before, but the AP essay rubrics. You might want to go back and look over the DBQ stuff. We'll talk about the rubric on Monday when we kind of are getting prepped for the DBQ we're going to do next week. But it wouldn't be a bad idea to kind of look at the rubric in advance. That way you can kind of remind yourself of some of the things you're going to be asked to do. So let's watch the World War I crash course, and then whatever time is left, knock out your SAQ. This one's pretty good, crash course. Some of them are okay. The guy's kind of annoying, I know how it is. But this one actually does a real good job of reviewing just about everything that you need. Plus, one of the reasons we do crash courses, these go with our curriculum. I mean, they really are designed to flow with the AP World History course. Some of the weird stuff he mentions, it's like, why is he mentioning that? Because it's something that you need to know specifically for this course. So pay attention. You don't have to take notes, but you certainly can if you want to. He does bring up a bunch of specific stuff that you could potentially write about. So watch and enjoy.
Hi, I'm John Green. This is Crash Course World History, and today we're going to talk about World War I, the so-called Great War. World War I wasn't the most destructive war or the first total war, and it's